All right. Hope everybody's having a good afternoon so far and a great start to your week. So, a little bit more in talking about group processes. And even though, as I've talked about before, I'm not always uh, the biggest in assigning group work. When you all, again, become, well, as you continue to be leaders in your respective fields and organizations, there probably will come situations where you'll need to utilize some level of teamwork. Um, so, with this in mind, you want to have a good understanding scientifically of some of the things that can allow the team to be most effective. So, some of the conditions that Wagaman unearthed in their research is that the team should be interdependent for some common purposes and have some stability of membership. Their overall purpose should be challenging, clear, and consequential. So again, that'll be your task as a leader to make sure that all of those components are in place, that you're clear on what you're asking, that it's going to be something that's going to be challenging but not overwhelming, challenging but not overwhelming. Then something consequential, consequential for the team itself, not just the person assigning the work. Generally, smaller teams, and this, makes sense. Smaller groups overall are generally a little bit more cohesive than larger ones. So smaller groups are probably a little bit better. That makes the norms and behaviors a lot more clear. We talked about last time social loafing. And social loafing is easier when, again, we can't tell, the example we talked about, Ron, if there's a situation where we cannot see what each member's contribution is, such as your project, it may be more difficult for people to put all their energy into it in a way that's different, like than Jakira, a relay race, where we can see where the slow poke is within this team concept. A reward system can also be beneficial, where people get some consequences for excellent team performance. And then finally, just making sure that some technical assistance is involved. You don't want to give guidance and then, particularly as and we'll talk about this a little bit in a moment, technology and things like that, you want to make sure that, the team has the tools that they need to be successful as well. So whether it be technology or some other resource, you want to make sure that that's available to them. So again, we talked about technology, and we spoke about groupthink last time. Does anybody recall offhand what we mean by groupthink?
Um, Groupthink is when like the individuals of a group kind of do away with their individual thinking and think as a group, right?
Good. So the individuals, and this is problematic because it stifles creativity and it stifles good decision making. That in any organization, no idea only comes from no good ideas only come from one place. So you would encourage people to share their ideas honestly. And computerized group systems have shown some success in being able to reduce this a bit. Again, groupthink is, it sounds easy. Well, hey, just, ask everybody what they think. But, getting people to tell you what they think and getting truly honest, constructive feedback can be two different things. So in this format, you can allow group members to raise their concerns anonymously. So one of the concerns that people may have sometimes in organizational structures is that punishment or retribution for a certain suggestion or if you disagree with somebody. So in a computerized format, it allows it where people don't necessarily have to put their name to a certain, claim or idea. You don't have to worry about direct attacks. Sometimes it can be where if we already know, and there have been group dynamics like that, where if we already know that we don't like Maisha, it could be a really good idea. But if Maisha said, oh, hell no. So now if it's anonymous, we don't have those kind of stigmas attached to it. And I say it in this regard, it can be, and making light of it in terms of an individual, but it can be where in an organization where, okay, I don't want to hear from these Hispanic people, or I'm a little bit biased from these perspectives from females. So it can reduce things in that regard as well. It helps to reduce the directive role of the leader, or again, like as a leader, you want to pull people into the discussion, but sometimes people may feel encouraged or discouraged from doing that. This process enables group members to provide input simultaneously. So again, as we talked about last time, as opposed to if we're sitting around and having a conversation where we have to wait for each person to finish speaking before they can share their ideas. In this format, you can, whenever something comes to mind, you can just throw it out there without, being rude or talking over somebody. It allows the least assertive members to state their ideas. So in this class, for example, I'm sure that there are many people who have many brilliant things to say. Ron, Maisha, where they've had me before and just may have more comfort level in speaking up. They obviously may have some good ideas, but oftentimes, we only get the ideas from, in this class setting is obviously not the same thing, but in an organizational structure, you don't only want to hear from the most assertive people, the people that may feel the most comfortable speaking, because Ron and Maisha might speak a lot and they might come up with a lot of really bad ideas. Meanwhile, Jakira, who may be a little bit more, reserved or may take a little bit more time to process her thoughts, this computerized format allows her to be able to share in this way that doesn't only allow you to hear from a couple of people. It allows you to have a more systemic agenda where you can kind of stay on task and focus on what you're trying to get people to contribute to the discussion. And again, related to that, it allows people to keep the focus on the ideas rather than the people. Because sometimes, we see this in Congress a lot of times, where a lot of people a lot of Republicans are opposed to Obamacare when it became Obamacare. But it actually was an idea created by Republicans. So we see things like that all the time now because this person came up with this idea. So computerized formats allows that to be reduced a bit. Virtual teams, again, as we see under COVID, but I think that some of the things that we've experienced this year, I think are probably going to become normalized. Not in terms of, we're not going to have a virtual office space, forever, but we're definitely going to have to do more things virtually and utilize the technologies, to reduce the geographic distance between people. I know already within some research I'm working on now where the ideal in plan, and I still, I have to do some interviews and I still want to do most of them in person, but quite frankly, I'm probably going to do a lot of them bad boys online. Saves a lot of time and money. But whatever the case, there will be situations where you may be here in the Carolinas and you might be working with somebody who's in India or in China. Now, a challenge with that, and again, I think we see this in an academic setting. It can be more difficult and challenging to build cohesiveness and to really build a team when you're virtual. That I'm still a very big believer, and of course, in this being a social psychology class, that personal connections between individuals still matter. I think, within an organization. So, for example, in team sports, one of the things I know that in free agency for football, Maisha, one of the things that's being lamented is that I'm thinking about signing this player and giving him $12 million a year to come play for my team. But I really would like to kind of sit and vibe with them. And you know how to, that's a pretty big decision, right? And in that case, you're not only looking at the performance, you're looking at all types of other things that they can bring to the organization. And some of those things you can't really glean, unless you're sitting across from somebody. Doing things I know people again that have gone to therapy during this time, and they've have done it virtually, and it's had some effectiveness, but nothing again being in person. So you have to be mindful of some of the challenges about that as well. And one of them is that um, it can increase the tension between team members and inhibit cohesiveness. It also makes it more difficult to socialize new members, where, again, think about it within an institution where the freshmen, you all, in adapting to like, a virtual environment, I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you all, but obviously a lot easier to adapt than like a freshman, like, where this is their first college experience and they on Zoom. Like, that's, I can imagine be very difficult and challenging. So the same things, again, that you would have to consider within your organizations as well. Another thing to consider, and I talked about this before in terms of preventing groupthink, because a huge part of groupthink is like really truly having diversity. And diversity, Jakira, doesn't just mean different faces in a room. It means really different perspectives. This is important in the regard that, like, look, I believe that human beings have, across race, gender, and class, we got a lot, way more in common than we do different. However, the perspective of an Hispanic woman is going to have life experiences that are going to be different from mine, that might inform how she sees things. Let's look at this, as we wait with bated breath at this Derek Chauvin case. That one of the reasons why we need more diversity within police work, for example, and true diversity, again, not just having Black figureheads, but being able to talk really honestly. I don't want to dovetail into this too much, but very briefly, Maisha, like immediately after, I think it's so many to keep up with because somebody Black gets killed by the police every few days, it seems. I think this probably was right after George Floyd got killed. And we, me and my good brother Jerome Bowers, we were invited to a forum, a police forum, to kind of discuss these issues. And and I made clear to them before coming in, like, look, I will accept your invitation, but it's really important that y'all understand the mindset that I'm in right now. I don't have a lot of patience for the saying conciliatory, yes, let's do better, let's reform, so I'm not really patient for that right now. So I let them know beforehand. They invited me anyway, Latavia. We got up in there and they were saying the same old stuff. And it wasn't an honest conversation. And that just really like bothered and annoyed me just to no end. And people were like, so by honest, Ron, I say that like there were Black people there that were discussing that issue a lot differently around white people and white police officers in particular than how Black people have been discussing this in our communities all the time when that was happening. But the white officers needed to hear that in a constructive way, not just about, complaining, but like, hey, here's what needs to be done. But a small thing where, like, Maisha, there was a conversation about, there's violence in the street. It's like violence, like, and they're talking about when people are like busting windows and breaking into a Foot Locker. I'm like, y'all serious right now? Y'all comparing that to like there are people that got murdered by people that are supposed to protect them. What are y'all talking about right now? Talking about a goddamn store that y'all know y'all got insurance on. But anyway, I say all that to say that when you get into these spaces, it's not important that, okay, Maisha, you're here. Okay, we got this Black girl in here. It's important that you express your community's point of view or perspective within that room and within that space. That if there are other women that are not within these spaces and these institutions, but there are issues that affect women that ain't being communicated, like you need to be the one to and that's a lot of pressure at times. I would encourage you to be the one to speak up on those things. But again, the leadership has to really encourage it. A lot of times people say they want diversity, but they don't really want diversity. And what we have in many of these organizations, Ron, that says, old white men running all these institutions, and it's hard to produce much different from that. But evidence on diversity on group performance is mixed. So again, it can increase miscommunication at times and misunderstandings where, again, there are so many things where, so Black women in particular, has anybody from another race ever asked to like touch your hair?
Wigs, yes.
Right. And how did
No.
that, how did you feel when that happened?
I don't know. It just depends how they come up to me, but they just love to touch wigs. Like they ask you dye your hair like that, like because I do a lot of colors. So they say you dye your hair like that all the time. It doesn't damages your hair. I just go along with it. I don't tell them it's wigs. They just think it's my real hair.
I can dig that. Ms. Hayesworth, I see you had a hand up.
Oh yes, sir. Because it really happens to me at my job. Like I have one white lady in particular, and like the time of hair, I change my hair from braids, wigs to my natural hair, and every time she want to touch it, and like it's kind of irritating because it's like the way you touch it, you don't touch it to learn, you touch it like it's like vaccination, and sometimes she be patting my hair like I'm a dog, and I be like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Right. So things like that where she may generally may not mean any harm, but she needs to understand culturally that's not okay. And she needs to understand culturally, like the politics of Black hair historically. It's important because like, so in many cases, Black folks have been told like, that to work in this space. I think I talked about this with a student who has some locks and he was worried about, hey, can I come and work in these corporate offices with my hair looking like this? Like, and again, like his concern was legitimate, but it is so frustrating that we live in a world where he has to think about those things. Because it should generally be about how do you perform in a job. But sometimes because of those things, one of the things that people will do, Maisha, is that they'll kind of make adjustments to kind of, reduce areas for those tensions within the office space, because it can lead to some frustration and resentment at times. But I also talked to people like one of my good friends told me about how some of these tragedies that have gone on in the last couple of years really opened her company up to having more robust discussions on race and gender issues than they would have been before. And for them to be more mindful about, sensitivity issues in terms of different communities. A small thing, for example, where my friend, like the day that the Breonna Taylor verdict came back, much like hell this week, like, it's they let this dude go. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a really tough blow. But when Breonna Taylor's verdict came down, like, for my friend, like, it was kind of a traumatic experience. And she would like, let her supervisors know, like, look, I know we had this scheduled today, but I'm not in a good place today. Like, I can't get down like this. Like, I need to go to the crib. I'm sorry. This is a bit much. And the job ended up shutting down things for everybody, like not just the Black people. In recognition that, hey, because it shouldn't just be a traumatic experience for Black people when somebody could be sleeping in their home and like, get killed for doing nothing at all. It should be something that's viewed as traumatic for the nation. So those are the kind of things I mean in terms of really having some cultural diversity and really understanding different perspectives. Another thing that the author talks about in this chapter is collective intelligence. Collective intelligence. This is really important. There's a notion that there are just some groups. Sometimes it could be racial groups, but more times than not, like organizations, companies, that whether it's right or wrong, Apple is viewed as like, having a collective intelligence that's unique, not just even to them in the tech industry, but to corporations, period. Nike is a company that historically has been viewed as having like, a huge degree of collective intelligence. Certain organizations, again, I hate the New England Patriots, but, obviously they were a lot more collectively intelligent when they had Tom Brady, but there's some organizations just seem to do the right things time and time and time again. There could be predictors of this. And again, you want to look at this within your organizations in terms of who you bring in to join the organization and what roles you have them play. So some of these tools include allowing various group members to take turns participating in the discussion. Where sometimes, again, it may be in a meeting where you just like, hey, does anybody have any ideas? That's very different than like, okay, look, for the first 15 minutes, Ron, I want to hear your spiel. Then like after that, we want to hear what Jakira thinks on the issue. Then Maisha, I want to hear from you, where again, you assign people responsibilities within the group. These organizations and these groups generally will have a higher proportion of women who generally have higher social sensitivity. And by higher social sensitivity, it just means being aware of how how a situation or circumstance is affecting other people. And then, frankly, like the individual members themselves generally are more intelligent, quote unquote. And by intelligence, it means like, intelligence for whatever, is related to. Obviously, there are different types of intelligence. Some people are really intelligent in terms of artistic stuff. Some people are really artistic intelligent when it comes to math and science. Others may be in terms of communication or things of that nature. So whatever it is, that is the goal of your organization in terms of the intelligence is value there. The final section of this chapter looks at conflict. In thinking about conflict, we want to consider what kind of dilemmas do groups often confront. Again, some problems are going to be very predictable. Others may be unique to time and place. We want to think about what factors influence whether individuals and groups act cooperatively or competitively in dealing with those dilemmas. So again, like, where we've talked about crabs in a bucket, like, in this class and others. But in social sciences, we believe that there are factors that can reduce those things, that there are factors that can force people to work a little bit more cooperatively and reduce their conflict. In conflict amongst human beings, individuals and groups is inevitable. There's going to be some of that. It doesn't, and again, some of it can be healthy sometimes. But if it lingers or becomes destructive for individuals or groups, obviously we want to correct it. So we want to also explore how can negotiation be used to help resolve group conflicts. Let's look a little bit more closely at what we mean by social dilemma. You're looking at this bullet point. How would you paraphrase this? Not an easy task, but how would you paraphrase this definition of social dilemma? How might you paraphrase this? Don't worry about right or wrong. Go ahead, Ms. Ainsworth.
I'll paraphrase this by saying like the ideas of individuals in the group conflict with each other, creating the issue within the group.
Okay, good. I like that. Good. So in a group situation, right? Like again, where, and is it anybody else want to add anything before I, chime in? Cool. So the group situation, right? Ideally, y'all are working towards the same goal. The whole purpose of you being in this group is for some task. So we're working under that assumption, first of all. If everybody is trying to do their own thing, Kobe and Shaq, it's going to be a little bit hard for the team to achieve their goals. So again, a social dilemma where if everybody in this group works in their self-interest, this group, Latavia, it can be a family, It can be an athletic team. It can be a business. It can be a society. Like the pandemic, for example, right? For however you may feel about it. A large part of the problem is that people have, decided like, hey, this is how I want to live my life and this is what I want to do. For on both sides of the issue. This is what I want to do. So I don't really care about the consequences for everybody else. Hell no, I'm not going to wear no mask. I don't care if I got symptoms or not. I feel okay. Like, because again, it's really important to understand that like you're not wearing really the mask for you. I know most people don't give a damn about their own lives. It's great. But in the society, for a society to work, we have to at least to a certain degree have some concern about each other's lives to a certain degree. Obviously, our own self-interest is going to be most important. That's understood. But if you only work in your self-interest all the time, you ain't going. It's hard to have a society like that. And those kind of self-interested things, like that was well before COVID. Like the whole Obamacare debate, for example, where people, hey, I don't want my, so long as I got my health insurance, I don't really care about everybody else's. Hey, I want to have my right to guns. If 100 people get shot up every week, that's their problem. And again, I'm not saying, and I got you 1 second, Ron. I'm not saying that any of those problems have easy solutions, but all of these problems require, these social dilemmas require people looking hard at themselves and having to make some kind of small concessions for the group outcome. That's what you have to do in almost every situation. Like I said, on a small level, a family. Your mama could easily be like, you know what? Look, I'm just going to look out for me and what I want. And there's some parents that do that. Like, look, I don't care what I don't care what their needs are. I don't care if they got this, like, they need this shot or they need this for school. I'm just going to look out for me. There are parents who exist like that. The family unit isn't going to function very well if everybody works under that capacity, and almost no group will. Ryan Anderson, you've been very patient.
Would you consider this like kind of like the opposite of altruism in a sense? Because altruism is basically self-sacrifice for the benefit of another person. But technically it wouldn't really be self-sacrifice. More so the sacrifice of the other person for the benefit of yourself, kind of.
That is an excellent way. Exactly. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Because really the self-sacrifice, you're doing it like, as a concession, recognizing the other person, but you also recognize that this is probably going to lead to my best personal outcome. So yes, it's understood that, it's very, like we talked about before in the chapter on altruism, it was only one Jesus. Most people are not like that, where they just can sacrifice blindly for everybody else without like looking at what am I going to get out of this. But there are certain situations where we have to look at, Ron, like, okay, look, the only way for this to work for any of us is all of us got to suck it up a little bit. Thoughts, questions? The prisoner's dilemma is a great example of this. The author talks about this in great detail. And what it looks at here, Rod, exactly what you talked about. That a move that, that you and Maisha may be making a move that appears to be both of y'all self-interest. But in the process, y'all end up canceling each other out and put yourselves in a worse position overall. Like, I mean, the crabs in a bucket, like, this is it. I'm trying to get up, so let me see if I can get up by pulling his leg. Oh, damn, we both down here. But so again, there are some social situations, and it's important, right? In certain social situations, Maisha, where you may have to be like, you know what? To hell with everybody else, I got to look out for Maisha. There are situations like that for sure. But it's very important that we as human beings understand the situations where, like, look, you need some help with this. Y'all have to work cooperatively. And sometimes organizations will put people in situations where they have to kind of manage themselves out of that. So again, research, there are several types of dilemmas. So we'll talk about the resource dilemma. where two or more people have to share a limited resource. I know I'm probably by myself on this by any chance. So I'm a big fan of Seth Rogen movies and stuff. Has anybody ever seen This Is the End by chance? It's super funny over the summer. I would really highly recommend y'all check it out. But it's basically, it's a film about, I'm not spoiling too much for when you do see it. It's a film about the end of the world, and they have limited resources, and they have to decide how to split them up. And in particularly food. So like they're in this house, it's like, okay, look, we only got a certain amount of food. We got to split this up so that everybody can try and stretch it out and survive. Oftentimes in those situations, and what do y'all think, even if you ain't seen the movie, what do you think may have happened after a while?
Somebody more hungry than what they,
somebody
more hungry than what they get for their rations, basically.
Right. And somebody eventually end up hoarding and stashing some food away on the sly, away from everybody else. So again, self-interest is very hard to overcome. But there are times where, again, you only got a certain amount of resources and you may have to share. But a real life situation in Hurricane Katrina, there was not access to clean water and stuff. So people, again, would be selling a small bottle of water, and they might sell it for like $20 or $25, something crazy. Why? Because they can. Now, I told this story before. The good news is that Latavia, they eventually beat the hell out of the people, just took their water. But when resources get dry, there are dilemmas like this all the time. And in our society, since it's such a wealthy society, there are not many resources that we are generally lacking. But when there have been, our society and others have not always responded well. Again, when there are social dilemmas, we just talked about this, right? There can be a fear of being exploited. Because again, when those resources, when those resources dry up, think about this again, where hell, it was COVID mask everywhere now, but when they first hit it, getting the mask was the hardest thing in the world. Trying to get, vaccine in the early months. Hell, trying to go to the grocery store and buy tissue. If anybody got some Lysol out there, I give you $50 for it. I'm joking, I ain't give you no $50, but if you see some Lysol somewhere, y'all let me know, because I ain't seen no Lysol in a year. So resources, again, say it again, Maisha.
I got 2 cans right now.
All right, I'm gonna have to, and I got 1 can I'm holding on to that I had before it hit. But I be rationing that boy out. My girl be can I use some of your Lysol? I'm like, what? Oh no, you sure? We gotta keep this to August. So Lysol, obviously, not a more important resource, but keep this in mind, because a lot of times we believe that there are resources that we just are always gonna have. Americans so rich, this should show how incredibly fragile our society is. And in this way, I highly recommend that you identify people that you can cooperate with and try and work through this system with. But what factors do you think promote cooperation in situations? Again, you may not know the textbook answer to this, but in situations, particularly where we're talking about their limited resources, what do you think will influence people to cooperate with each other? And so when there's a situation of resource dilemma, what might force them to actually look out for one another?
I was gonna say, again, not necessarily survival of the fittest, but for example, let's say, it's the end of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and your 3 people that you've been traveling with for a month cannot secure a stable source of food. However, there's this new group, let's call them the survivors, right? Fireflies, let's call them fireflies. They have a group, they have food, but they killing people for it, right? So it's kind of up to you to make the decision. Well, damn, are we gonna stay out here separate from them and try to make ends meet, Or are we gonna say, okay, let's just cooperate with them in order to survive, even if it goes against like what we kind of want to do morally, in a sense? Yeah,
That's a really good example. So I think yes, mere survival. That definitely would be one of the first ones where we see that, and I'm talking about real life or death type thing. Like you'll see it fictionally, like, but not even just then. I was gonna say like in disaster movies or something like that, Independence Day, or the Tom Cruise stuff, War of the Worlds type thing, where people will kind of look out for and cooperate. But even in like natural disasters and stuff like that, people will look out for each other a lot. So I think that's a really good one. Any other thoughts on factors that you think will promote cooperation, particularly in really desperate times?
I would say the resources that other people have, like, during the pandemic, say if I had 10 cases of water, but you had the tissue, we could work together. Like, we'll both have water and tissue because we both have different resources that we both need.
Excellent, Mike. That's a really good one. I'll give you one extra credit point for that. Was a very good example. So yeah, when you see, that's brilliant actually. When you see again that people that work in coalitions can help improve your position, and somebody has something tangible that they can offer you to put you in a better position, and you can see those tangible benefits, you're right, there's a lot better opportunity of cooperation. A couple more points and we'll leave it here for today. That there are certain psychological factors. So obviously, and again, this may sound simple, but just trust that if there's people that, and this is important because within an organization, Ron, like, you want to put your followers, quote unquote, in situations where they can build and develop trust already. So again, even in sports teams, like being able to feel like I can rely on you when times are down and how you're going to behave in certain situations is really important. Situational factors, the same way we talked about with altruism, just being in a good mood, you'll be more likely to help. Being exposed to unselfish models, that if you have grown up around parents, clergymen, and others that have been very cooperative themselves, you're going to be more likely to be that, in your situation. And under group dynamics, we talked about again, being in this, is you're going to get more cooperation in a small group than a large group. We even talked about this, like when we in the chapter on altruism, when people decide, in terms of deciding to help, if it's hundreds of people around and you feel like, okay, well, that dude got it, you're less likely to cooperate as opposed to in a small group setting. And then the structure itself, creating a payout structure that rewards cooperative behavior and punishes selfish behavior. Again, so you want to create structures, where people are encouraged to look out for one another as opposed to only looking out for themselves. We'll leave it there for now. Please make note again, your final exam date is coming up. Please make sure that you look through the syllabus to see which chapters have been assigned in the second half. It's not every chapter has been assigned, and I didn't go in order. And if anybody has any questions about the exam leading up to it or need any extra help, please don't hesitate to let me know. And we'll continue with group processes on Thursday.